In the wake of the financial system crisis of 2008, Congress is considering ways to strengthen the regulation of financial institutions. A bill is before the Senate to overhaul the nation's financial regulations. Virginia Senator Mark Warner has been involved in crafting the legislation. He joins us now from Washington. Senator, thanks for your time.
Thanks for having me, Bob.
What are the most important elements of the bill that are agreed on?
Well, the most important part, I think, is to make sure that we end the whole idea that some of these banks are too big to fail, and that we've got to prevent that ever again having the taxpayer have to bail out an institution because its failure would bring down the whole financial system. I've worked with actually Republican Senator Bob Corker in a bipartisan way to craft that part of the bill. It got endorsed 93-5 with a series of amendments that I think improved it to make sure that taxpayers will never have to bail out a big bank again. We've got to make sure as well that we've got better oversight of some of these sophisticated financial instruments, the derivatives, and some of these other tools that have been created in recent years. They have a useful purpose, but there needs to be a lot more transparency around them. And we've got to make sure that in this world, as we saw just last Thursday, when the stock market for a moment in time lost $1 trillion because there was some kind of technology glitch, that we've got oversight and more transparency around these areas like high-frequency trading so that we've got financial rules of the road for the 21st century. I'm all for making sure that America remains the capital markets center for the whole world, but we've got to have 21st century rules of the road because we can never again go through the kind of downturn where there was this excessive risk-taking that then, American taxpayers and folks in Harrisonburg and elsewhere had to basically pay the price for some of the excesses on Wall Street.
So how does the bill limit firms too big to fail? Does it put a size limit on them? How does it do it?
No, well, I didn't think an asset size limitation was the right approach. What we said was, let's look at their risk profile. Let's look at how interconnected they are. Let's require each of these big firms, like the Goldman Sachses of the world or the Citibanks, to tell the regulators how you would unwind yourself through an orderly bankruptcy process. Show us, and if we can't sign off on that plan, well, we may choose to break up parts of your operations, but we're going to break it up based upon your risk and based upon the fact of making sure that we can unwind you in bankruptcy in an orderly way, not simply how large you are. I don't think size alone ought to be the criteria. We've also put in requirements that these firms that will have to have more capital on reserve. We'll look at how much their leverage is, how many times they can, for every dollar of capital, how much borrowing they can go against that. We're going to ask them to require them to put a whole new series of debt on their books that would convert to equity if they got in trouble again, that would dilute their existing shareholders. I know this is getting into the weeds for your viewers a little bit, but the weeds is really important on this subject. I spent 20 years around the financial markets, and I want to make sure that we don't restrict the ability to have financial innovation, but I got concerned that some of the financial instruments, some of these derivative contracts, the so-called credit default swaps and some of these other things were actually more about trying to generate fees and kind of casino-style gambling than they were really about trying to hedge risk. So we want to try to make sure that that's done in a smarter way.
Senator, you have supported oil production off Virginia's coast. Given what has happened in the Gulf of Mexico, have you reconsidered your support?
Well, Bob, one of the reasons I had supported offshore drilling is because I think we need an all-of-the-above approach on trying to change our energy policies. Continued use of coal, more use of nuclear, more use of solar and wind and the renewables, but also, while I think we should ultimately decline our use of oil, I'd rather be using American oil in the meantime rather than particularly oil from the Middle East. Now, I also changed my view about offshore because we've gone for 30 years without a major oil spill. So I do believe we need to make sure that we take a pause now, find out what caused this tragedy in the Gulf, and let's make sure it never happens again, and then we can look at how we proceed. I do think even if Virginia had these leases, we're 10 years away from any production taking place off the course of Virginia, but let's go ahead and pause until we find out what happened in the Gulf.
All right, Senator Mark Warner, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Bob.
And now let's send it